If you think about where we are in terms of the workforce, by the end of 2018, 46% of the workforce will be millennials. And they think about the world in a very different way than certainly the way that I do in most of this room. I have bad news for you. As I look around, most of you are old. And I am as well. And the way that I find that out all the time is that I have a 17-year-old son, a 15-year-old daughter, and a 12-year-old son who are consistently reminding me that I am old. And one of the ways that they do that is the things that they don't know about, like a phone with a cord or a CD player even. And so, yeah, a fax machine, things that have gone by the wayside. In fact, I remember a concert looking like this. When they go to a concert, they think of it like this. And the reality is that that change in the dynamic is changing things. I have a very old mother, and my kids don't like to talk anymore. They don't want to talk on the phone. They don't want to communicate that way. They text everything. They've even stopped doing email for the most part. Well, my mother, the whole text thing just doesn't work. So what she does is once a week she calls me and says, "Did the kids send me any texts?" Yes. What did they say? Because she just can't bring herself to do that. And so what's happening in the technology space is that you're seeing rapid advancement in a number of different technologies in a way that's really changing the way that the younger generation travels. And I'm not saying that everybody in here isn't a big tech user, and I was joking when I said we were old, but we're on the cusp of a whole new generation of people that are involved in travel. And a little bit to what Mario talked about before, which is the pace of change in the technology space has really been driven by the industry in the past. So the next generation of technology that we've brought to bear over the last 15 years has been largely brought by the innovators that were industrial innovators, right? So the Sabres of the world and others that were really generating the next generation of technology and travel. And what's happening is because of those millennials and because of the change associated with that, you're seeing that now being driven by the consumer. Because what's happening is that people have been able to take more control of their technology destiny, and that will only have a greater impact as we move forward. If you think about it today, for every baby that's born, there are 5 new smartphones that are activated. So when you begin to think about the impact of that over a period of time, it'll be significant. I would actually argue that the smartphone wasn't really what changed Apple, and it wasn't really what changed the amount of change in technology. It was really the App Store. So it was the iTunes store that really had the most significant impact, because it did something that in only 2008, so we're only 7 years into the app world, as it were. And if you think about the impact that that's had on the way that people interact with their devices, it's been dramatic. So before you got your smartphone, it was preloaded with a set of applications and software, and that was all you could use. And now you have what is eventually going to have to be overhauled again, because if you've been to the App Store lately, it is terribly confusing. It's actually only good, candidly, if you know exactly what you're looking for. So if you go to the App Store and you know exactly what you're looking for, it's easy to find, and it's easy to download, and then it's easy to begin using because it's fairly intuitive. But if you're going to the App Store as a buyer going, what if, I wish, those kind of things, it's actually quite difficult to use. And so there'll have to be some streamlining of that moving forward. But it's changing in travel more than perhaps any other industry. So you look at the usage rates. This is a study that was done a few years ago, last year, 2015, that asked a simple question of do you use your mobile device while you travel? These are the answers. So almost 100% of China uses their mobile device while they're traveling. And the question was then, what do they use it for? So 81% of travelers use it for basically geolocation, navigation. So getting around a city, trying to find where you're going. The more surprising number is that 68% of those people also use it for activities nearby. So I'm here, I want to know what's in my general area. What is it that I'm... And so when you look at the spend on travel, almost 60% of the money that's spent is spent inside the trip, right? During the time that you're spending. So not on airfare, not on original pre-reservations, it's spent during the trip. And so getting connected to those travelers during the time period when they're most likely to spend money is going to become more and more and more important. So let's think kind of into the future. This is actually a mock-up of the new Istanbul airport, which will come online here in a few years, making a dramatic change actually to Istanbul as a gateway. They'll move from what is around 50 million travelers now to kind of 150 million or so travelers through Istanbul in the next several years. And so what are some of the impacts we should think about into the future? I think Mario mentioned Oculus Rift earlier. So here's a embarrassing secret about me. I love to travel and I love to be a tourist. I don't like to feel like a tourist though. And so I have that weird syndrome of where I like to think that I look like I'm local, even though I never do, right? You know, it's kind of, I like to feel like I'm walking through the city like I've been there 10 years instead of 10 minutes. And what I think is really interesting about augmented reality is that you can begin to experience a city before you go in a new way, different than looking at a map, different than searching for activities and features, but it will give you the ability to actually pre-take your trip in a way that allows you to think about, I thought I wanted to go see the London Eye when I was in London, but when I did the Oculus Rift view of that, I didn't find it to be terribly interesting. So I choose to do something else, but it's going to change and have an impact on the way that people pre-experience. And you could pre-experience that and then call your virtual assistant, Anna, and say, I need you to book me to London, and here's what I need to do. That AI feature is going to in the future be different, but the reality is that much of that technology exists today. And 3D without the red and blue glasses is really already here, and the impact of that to tourism will be dramatic because it has the ability to really bring things alive in a new way. So I talk about all those things as if they're a future. It's not really future. This is Marriott that utilized the Oculus Rift technology along with 4D motion sensors that allowed people to be teleported to a number of their different properties. So they prototyped this just recently, and we're able to send people to Hawaii, to Washington, D.C., and to New York City and have a fully immersive feeling of actually being in those cities. So that is something that's real. It's something that is already in production and already being used. And again, we'll have the ability for people to begin to pre-experience trips. And for suppliers like Marriott, they see it as a way for them to really begin to expand the way that their customers interact with them as a brand, as a property, and as an interactive way to really begin to gain their business. Our virtual assistant exists already too. This is X.AI. They have a virtual assistant called Amy, who's up there on the screen, that allows you to manage your calendar as long as you copy her on the email with the person you want to meet with. So the service is actually oversubscribed. If you want to try to go get on the waiting list, you can, but they think about 98-ish% complete, meaning they don't have to touch it. There's no manual intervention to get from a point of the request. They still have some cleanup on a little bit of it, but it's getting very, very close. And so the things that you talk about as if they're future aren't really future. They're here now and already having an impact in the way that we think about things. When you talk about wearables, so the numbers for 2015 there were 1.4 billion smartphones, there were 233 million tablets, and there were around 75 million wearables. So whether that's a watch or biometrics. And so that growth in wearables is changing, and they're becoming more effective. And some of the original ones, where I mentioned Pebble, were fairly rudimentary, but and neat. I had one. It was fun. Wear it around, get a message every once in a while. It was kind of neat. Some of the Samsung gear and the Apple Watches have become more effective, and the apps on them have become better. But they will eventually become part of day-to-day life. The reality is that we will all get used to much more quickly the fact that at a touch and at a look and at a glance, we'll have more information available to us than we ever had in the past. We've already started with biometrics. Obviously, for those of you with your Apple phones out there, already use biometrics to log into those phones. We're doing some inside the technology space with airlines and airports right now to tie your fingerprint to your passport and then utilize that as the check-in method that we utilize across both the airlines check-in as well as the airport's check-in process. So things that will help tighten security but also make it easier on travelers. And I think when you begin to think about the consumerization of travel, that's what it's about. It's about not only making things easier for the traveler, but more secure for those suppliers on the back end. One of the interesting things about what you can do with an Apple Watch and some of the others is the integrated technology. So if you look at Apple Pay today, it has a fairly interesting mechanism to know that it's you that's utilizing the watch, which is you enter your password when you initially log in, and then as long as you don't take the watch off, it knows that it's still you because the watch has never left your wrist, and so it allows you to utilize the pay technology without having to put your password in every time. But that seems a little sketchy still for some people. And so what two companies that are in Canada have been working on with MasterCard and the Bank of Canada is actually biometrics that takes an ongoing EKG of your heartbeat. And because all of our hearts are different, they beat with a different pace, and it's almost like a fingerprint. And so it's allowing them to build a payment mechanism that's also very similar, that utilizes the fact that it knows that it's you because it's your heart beating at your pace that is a very similar, that is an exact match to what's already been stored. And so those things, all that allow us to begin to identify travelers in new ways, because as people have talked about, security has become a huge issue across the travel industry. And so as we move forward in the way we think about new airports, new technologies, et cetera, it's about, again, trying to make sure that we're making things more secure, but also making them easier for the end traveler. Obviously, all of us are familiar today with the technology change to being able to app enable the Internet of Things, meaning your home, meaning your hotel room, all of those things. We've worked with a number of hospitality folks just recently on the guest experience. Sabre Hospitality Solutions, our hospitality arm, has created a number of on-site property maps that allow for a deeper engagement with the traveler in a way that is changing the way that we interact. And a lot of that includes the onboarding of a traveler that allows them to then take care of their in-room needs in a new way. Pretty soon, the hardwiring of light fixtures and stereos and TVs will certainly be a thing of the past. There's some work that's been done already on how you utilize in the air the Oculus Rift technology and others. They're certainly advancing the way that the experience of the traveler on the aircraft. We've done a lot with airlines also so if you've traveled with some of our hosted carriers lately, you've seen that many of the airlines have begun utilizing tablets on board. That's how they manage knowing who you are in the seat. You'll recall it wasn't too long ago that if you could be a top-tier traveler on an airline, and the flight attendants had no way to know that. So if you happen to have made your reservation at the end of the booking cycle, you didn't get upgraded, you ended up in a middle seat and coach, you might be a 200,000 mile a year traveler that happened to be in the middle seat and coach, as opposed to a 2,000 mile traveler that was at a middle seat and coach, and the flight attendant experience was exactly the same, which is, depending if you were flying on one of the not so hospitable airlines, it could have ended up being a terrible experience, actually. But what we've been able to do is bring that data forward, put it into a mobile device on a tablet on the aircraft, which then allows that flight attendant to know, oh, Mrs. Smith is a significant traveler with us. I need to say hello with a smile and perhaps offer her a drink in a way that she might not have had it been a scenario where she didn't know who the traveler was. Of course, you can now keep up with your bags. There are Bluetooth bags that you can use. Make sure that you know whether they've made it on the aircraft with you. I actually am not clear on what this does other than frustrate you earlier. Because you get on the plane, your Bluetooth connected to your bag, you're pulling away, you know that your bag's not moving, but you are, and then you have 2 or 3 hours to think about it before you land. It's a little frustrating. However, it is getting to the point where the airlines know where your bag is a little more effectively because they're using some of the same technology. So the hope is around this space, and we've done a lot on cargo, is that very soon we'll be in a place where there's the ability for the airline to know if they've misconnected with the bag, let you know before you've gotten off the aircraft, and let you know exactly when it'll return to you and to your possession. Airlines are doing a lot, and when we talked earlier, and Mario mentioned it earlier, is the pace of change fast enough. And one of the biggest issues with the pace of change in the airline industry in particular is around data. And the fact that we have created an industry that is very data intensive. When you talk about big data, a lot of industries talk about big data because they want to create more data to get more insight. The airline industry is not one where we need to create more data. We need to make better use of the data that we already have. We have plenty of data. And so part of the problem that has been created over a period of time with retailing and merchandising from the airline space, as well as the expansion and unbundling of ancillaries, is that it becomes more and more difficult to figure out whether or not you're getting a good deal, right? So if I go back to 2000, in 2000 there were a little more than 2 million available fares in the fares database of Sabre. If I look at it today, on any given day, from New York to London, there are more than 6 million available fares that are actually purchasable. There are actually 5 billion available fares and rules for any given day. If you are not date specific, so any given destination, London to New York. So what has to happen is that data has to get collated, searched, shopped, brought down to something that's meaningful, meaning that there are probably 1.5 million or so available fares and rules tied to schedules that are actually applicable. So you wouldn't fly New York to Miami, LA, New York, London, but you might get a cheaper fare if you did. But you wouldn't fly that, so you have to throw those things out. So the complexity of the industry has gotten such that it means the pace of change in the technology space continues to lag that. What we've been able to do recently is create some handful of applications and an underlying technology we call intelligence exchange, which allows us to be able to normalize all the data associated with airline operations and the way that airlines interact, and it allows them to then build applications on top of that. So if they want to build a loyalty application that allows them to have a greater, more capable ability to interact with their loyalty members, they're able to do that without having to go to disparate data sources in order to do that. And so we're advancing the way that we extrapolate data, and I think as you get that to the acceleration around how you utilize data, it will accelerate the pace of change associated with the way that airlines interact. On the hospitality space, and whether that's cars or hotels or the most recent research study said that they think that the self-driving car, the largest user of the self-driving car, will be Uber, who will displace, they've displaced taxi cabs already. Pretty soon they'll displace the drivers of the black car as we get automated automobiles. But the bonus of once you get to something like this is that you also are connected via Bluetooth and other things to hotels, to others. So the pre-check-in process, you've got Hilton in the United States that's already utilizing the smart doors. So there are a number of hotels, and they're rolling that out more aggressively, that once you walk in the front door, if you've pre-downloaded the Hilton app, will check you in as you walk in, provide the number to your phone of your room number. You can go straight to the room. The room key is your phone. It actually opens based on the fact that you've already downloaded the software. And so really customizing that experience. Another thing that hoteliers worry about, obviously, is what did you just take out of the equation? You took out any human interaction with the guest, which means the ability to cross-sell, upsell, offer additional services gets more challenging. So it means the technology has to keep up in that way too, which is you've got to have travelers that are willing to interact with their digital device instead of just with people. And I'll tell you, there are wonderful hotels here in town. The St. Regis is one of them. If you've stayed at the St. Regis here, their interaction with you as a guest is nothing short of spectacular. They meet you at the door. They have concierge services throughout the hotel. They have butler services in the rooms. And so once you replace a lot of that with technology, you have to find a way to interact with guests in a similar way. And so that's the next generation of the guest experience technology that we're building and that others are looking into, which is to try to make sure that people still feel like they're being treated like people, despite the fact that interaction might be only with their mobile device. Certainly that's going to continue with locale. We're seeing more and more purchases made on the mobile device. Last year, one of the larger onlines in EMEA said that 27% of all the hotels that were booked on their site were booked via a mobile device. So a pretty dramatic increase in the number of mobile bookings being made. And a lot of it is around local excursions and other things, but we're seeing a greater and greater increase in the velocity of those types of bookings on a mobile device. And then my favorite thing, just for those of you who attend conferences like these, is that using Bluetooth and RFID chips in name badges, it's actually become a thing that you can look at attendees for a conference. As long as they're already loaded on the thing, you can download their LinkedIn or Facebook profile to your phone, and then you can set haptics on your watch to let you know when you've gotten close to somebody on your list. So if I was scheduled, I made sure that there were 5 or 6 people I wanted to meet with. I'd pre-download their profile. I'd set up an individual haptic for each one of them, so 2 buzzes for Jane, 3 buzzes for Jim, and then my watch would tell me when I happened to run into them. It might also, I could set up 6 haptics for you've met everybody here you wanted to meet, and that would let me know it was time to go. More and more you're getting location-enabled services. So TripCase, which happens to be one of our applications that has a lot of mobile applications as well as wearable application. We do notifications for travel, but we also use location-based services to be able to notify on things. So once you get inside 3 miles of the airport, it notifies you if your flight's on time. Once you get within a mile of the airport, it tries to check you in if it's an airline that we're connected with. And so more and more this is going to become the norm. And the reality is our kids will lead the charge on a lot of this, but we need to keep up as well. And of course, probably the best use of technology anywhere is the fact that they spent millions on these 2 robots. This is Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines, and what these robots do is serve drinks. They're robot bartenders. So quite a good use of the future. But I'll tell you that the future has arrived. It's just not evenly distributed, and it's really our goal at Sabre is to try to make sure that we get that evenly distributed more quickly. So thank you very much. I'm glad to take questions if there are any. I think they said we had 5 minutes or so. Any questions? All right, thanks very much.